Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. The color is red. The day is Tuesday. Today we're going to be going over the chapter 16 in the book A Practical Guide to Qabalistic Symbolism. This chapter is going to cover the Sephra known as Malkuth. Malkuth can be related to the material plane. It can also be related to the planet Earth. It is in this sphere that we're going to find that all of the influences, all the forces, and all the forms that took place from Kether all the way down coalesce, solidify, and become the material plane. So we're going to get started on learning about the complete 10th Sephirah. But that's not over. Much more to come after that. But in the meantime, welcome. And if you can go ahead and hit that like button, I would appreciate that very much. Seeing as to how YouTube likes to organize the content based on engagement. Greetings, good evening. So we will get started here in just a moment. It's a beautiful day, beautiful evening. I hope you're doing well. I hope that you got to experience gratitude and love. And if you haven't, maybe it'd be a smart idea to go ahead and try to invoke some of that right now, because it's free and it's also healing. Gratitude, peace, love. Not just cheesy filler words. These are states of consciousness that are required if one wants to explore the higher realms of the organization that we know of as the universe. You could even tell by looking at the chart in power versus force, those higher levels are preceded by gratitude. Let's see. I believe it's page 90. Right, there we go. So yeah, even in this map of consciousness in power versus force, we see these higher levels up here have a lot to do with peace, joy, love, serenity, right? Forgiveness, neutrality. These things are absolutely necessary as a vehicle of consciousness, right? And when I say consciousness, I'm speaking about big consciousness, not individual consciousness, but macrocosm consciousness. Our mind state serves as the vehicle for the type of the quality of consciousness that we allow to express itself through us. So if we keep our awareness focused on shame and guilt and apathy and those type of things, we are restricting the quality of consciousness that can flow through us. So when I keep talking about gratitude and love and all that stuff, it's not like love and light and peace and run from your problems. I'm saying that because these are states of mind that are required to experience bliss, illumination, etc., etc. So, like I said, I hope that you're able to find a moment to be grateful, to invoke the feeling of compassion for your fellow life forms. So yeah, just real quick, since we're on the topic of Malkuth, I got this book yesterday as a suggestion from Sunshine Chick, Inner Space by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, who just so happens to be the same fellow who wrote on Sefer Yetzirah. So he somewhat knows what he's talking about. I'm being sarcastic. He absolutely knows what he's talking about. And I wanted to share just these two paragraphs on Asaya. But basically he says, It is therefore written that God creates evil, thus equating evil with darkness, similar to darkness, which is the restraint and constriction of light, right? So darkness is the restraint and constriction of light. The possibility of evil had to be created something from nothing. Before the original Simsum constriction, there was nothing but the light of the infinite being. God's very infinity, however, precludes the existence of anything which can receive the essence of life that he wishes to give. It was therefore necessary to create something completely different and opposite from himself. This is the concept of constriction itself, which is here called darkness and evil. Darkness, constriction, allows for the existence of a finite world where God's presence is absolutely undetectable and both good and evil can operate freely. This in turn sets the stage for a creature far removed and opposite from God who can resemble him by freely choosing light over darkness, good over evil. The very existence of evil, in fact, is solely in order to be transformed by man in the act of choosing good. Through his struggle, man attains shalom, peace, and unifies himself and the creation with God. So a lot of things there. A lot of things there. For one, like what I just said with power versus force, it's necessary to cultivate these feelings of wholeness, peace, and oneness and unity. Shalom, right? This is what we're here to attain, basically. Because anything less would constitute as darkness, and darkness is represented as the constriction of light. You feel me? So that's exactly what I mean when I talk about gratitude and peace and love and harmony and all those things. For most of us, it takes work and constant reminders to focus on it, but eventually it will become a state of mind that you can live in. That's the goal, right? And that's what I've been saying lately as far as the Magician card. It is our duty as a magus to arrange the forces that come from above and organize them below in the way that we see fit. And when I say the way that we see fit, I don't mean the way the ego sees fit. I mean in balance with the whole system. This is literally our job. This is why we study this stuff. Whether you realize it yet or not, it isn't simply about making yourself feel good. Although it is good to do that. But just keep in mind, you're learning this stuff for a much bigger purpose than your individual life. But yeah, so far this is really good. I am really digging this book. Thank you, Sunshine Chick, for recommending it to me. So, let us get on with chapter 16 on Malkuth. Good stuff, good stuff. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for being here. Alkanamu, peace, greetings. Kumaji, welcome, welcome. Ace Maseo, it's all good. It's all good. As long as you keep watching, it'll all line up. Framestar Films, peace, peace. Creating a new universe. Good evening. Caesar, peace, peace, peace. Shalom, shalom. Ra, peace. Brother Ali 47, peace. All right, let's get started. We're going to talk about Malkuth. Sabrina Art Life, good evening. Okay. Chapter 16, page 189. We're almost finished with this whole book. You all are some studious students. Finishing these books back to back, no breaks, just digging on through it. I told you what my mission was. My mission was to master a level of understanding of the Kabbalah, the tree, the past, the whole thing. That's my goal for this year. Sabrina Art Life, peace. Will Trent, glad to see you, bro, always. Okay, tonight on the menu, Waterloo, grape flavored. My store only has 3 flavors of this. I was so surprised to see that there's actually, I don't know, 7 flavors. Guess I have to order it off Amazon now. Useless familiar. Good evening. All right, so this is where we are, Malkuth. We went through the whole process all the way down, and here we are at Malkuth. So, chapter 16, Malkuth, the kingdom. The 10th path is called the resplendent intelligence because it is exalted above every head and sits upon the throne of Binah. It illuminates the splendors of all the lights and causes an influence to emanate from the Prince of Countenances, the Angel of Kether. Will Trent says, yo, last night I did so much meditation and studying on the magician. Yeah, man, there's a lot of mysteries here to be unlocked. A lot of mysteries. Kether as the white underrobe, Binah as the red robe. I believe it's Hakma as the silver belt, which is, as you can see, the snake biting its own tail. Yeah, there's a lot of mysteries here to be uncovered. It was MC Maestro that pointed out also that you see this red cloak for the next few cards. You see the Empress sitting on it. You see the Emperor having it under his top cloak. You even see the Hierophant with these same colors. So there's something to that. Let's continue. The magical image is a young woman, crowned and throned. Sounds familiar. But yeah, the magical image of Malkuth is a young woman, crowned and throned. The god name is Adonai Melech, or Adonai Ha-Aretz. The archangel is Sandalphon. The order of angels are the Ashim, the souls of fire. And like I said before, you'll notice that between this book and the Ladder of Lights, the angels of Malkuth and Yesod are switched, and the archangels of Hod and Tifereth are switched. So there might be a mystery to that as well. For those of you who are going back to do your own research. The mundane chakra is the sphere of the elements, right? The 5 elements. The virtue is discrimination. The titles are the gate of death, gate of the shadow of death, gate of tears, gate of justice, gate of prayer, gate of the daughter of the mighty ones, gate of the Garden of Eden, the inferior mother, Malka, the queen, Kala, the bride, the virgin. The spiritual experience, knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. I love that conversation. The absolute color, yellow. The Briatic color, citrine, olive, russet, and black. That's the one that we know. If you haven't noticed by now, the Briatic color scale is the one that we've been using for these sessions. Because that's the actual world where that's the highest that we can reach as far as the world of turning these gears to make things happen. We don't really mess with Absoluth because it's not designed really to be messed with. So, the Asiatic color is black, rayed yellow. The Yetziratic color is also citrine, olive, russet, black, flecked gold. The vice is avarice, inertia, right? Avarice and inertia, tamas, death. That's the vice of this world. But notice the virtue, discrimination. Where did we read about discrimination? We've been going through this book talking about discrimination. So you can see that this is the beginning of the path. Even as he said in this book, Gyan Yoga, the path of know thyself, it starts with discrimination. Discrimination and non-attachment. See, all the stuff that we've been talking about with the Yogi series, that's what's necessary to get started on this path. You feel me? Because it takes a shaping of the mind, which includes non-attachment and discrimination, which is the virtue of Malkuth. right? The symbols are the altar of the double cube, the equal armed cross, the magic circle, the triangle of evocation. We know that from the Goetia. Verse 1. The Sephirah Malkuth represents the entire physical world, and though it may seem that the fact of the physical world is obvious to everyone, there are probably few people who are really capable of living in it at will. That is, whose consciousness is focused in present time and place and not wandering to happy or traumatic conditions of the past or wish fulfillment dreams or vague worries of the future. Dang, he kicked it off. He kicked it off, calling everyone out. Let me see what he said again. Yeah. It might seem the fact that the physical world is obvious to everyone, right? It's obvious. That's what we would assume. We would assume it's obvious. But he says there are probably few people who are really capable of living in it at will. We know that. Autopilot. There's few people who are really capable of living in this world at will. That is, whose consciousness is focused in the present time and place and not wandering to happy or traumatic conditions of the past or wish fulfillment dreams or vague worries of the future. So many people have all their faculties centered on their mental life or their emotional life rather than the sensory life of the physical world. How many of us are guilty of that? There's even a kind of religious aversion to sensuousness. The word itself has unsavory overtones to it in many quarters, so that it tends frequently to be confused with sensuality, the undue indulgence in the grosser pleasures of sense. It is interesting to note that originally the word sensual was quite an innocent one, but that its meaning became corrupted, so that Milton had to coin the new word, sensuous, which was now also deteriorated in popular usage, if not in academic definition. Milton's own phrase to describe great poetry, simple, sensuous, and passionate, for example, might well be seen nowadays as a selling slogan on the cover of any paperback novel or blazoned forth in the trailer of any semi-erotic film. Again, this is one of the symptoms of the Puritan pathology, an unconscious compulsion to rub dirt into the gates of the senses. The soul of a race can be judged from its use of language, just as the psychology of an individual can be assessed by the newspaper and magazines he reads. There's a lot in that paragraph, a whole lot in that section. But basically, as I went over already, first off, he starts at that saying that most people aren't really fit to live in the present world because we're so busy focused on the past or the present, or we're caught up in our emotional life or our mental life. And many of us are even taught to avoid the physical sensory world, right? We're taught to keep our awareness projected into the future for some goal, or sometimes we stay stuck on memories, usually painful memories, or sometimes pleasurable memories, but we're not here now with our full awareness on the body. Very few of us are at any given time. But then he also goes to say about in the past how just the word sensual got confused with, basically sexuality and indulging with the pleasures of the flesh. And, since we know that Christianity has really beat the whole sin and the sin coming from being in flesh, because that process of avoiding sensuality has been so deeply ingrained into our culture, we almost religiously avoid our sensory life. But then he ends it with the soul of a race can be judged from its use of language, just as the psychology of an individual can be assessed by the newspaper and magazines he reads. Right? I made a post maybe a few months ago about, it was a question, if a date takes you to the bookstore, how would you react to that? And I think probably the best comment was, I would follow him and see what kind of, or her, I would follow what kind of books that they read, just to kind of get an idea of who you're dealing with. I think that was a good line that someone wrote. But in that same way, the soul of a race can be judged from its use of language. I would even say also its use of symbols or memes, because truly that's our collective unconscious communicating with itself, all the shared memes and the jokes and the words that we choose to use. Hmm. Interesting. Ross says, I'd start placing my crystals about hidden round books. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea, especially the ones in your own home. So, verse 2. The ambivalent attitude to the world of physical sensation is a strange one. It is, at the same time, a running away from it into past, future, or sanctimony, and also a strange, unhealthy fascination and feeling of guilt which characterizes the Anglo-Saxon mentality in particular. Yet, looking at things from an evolutionary and reincarnationary standpoint, the physical world is the world which should be thoroughly grasped by the soul. There is ample time for emotional and mental meanderings after death. The physical world, in that one has to return to it time and time again, must hold the key to spiritual development. And this development is surely not to be gained in regarding all physical nature as a trap and temptation which must be strenuously denied and put away from one. A trap, right? That's another thing I had to learn, because I was just like some of these other people who consider the world this prison, right? The earth, this dimension is a prison, and we're trapped here and we're being fed upon, and we've got the demiurge and the devil to look out for. I remember thinking that way, right? And it's easy to think that way because that's what you're being sold, that's what you're being given. But that's not how things are. That's not how things are. This world is not meant to be avoided and ran away from. Just like any problem or any obstacle in your life isn't there just to be run away from or hidden from. It's meant to be neutralized. That's how you do shadow work, not by running away from it, but neutralizing it. Neutralizing it in the way that it no longer has an influence over you. So if you're scared of the demiurge and the archons or the devil, or if you're looking at life as a prison or the world as a prison or anything like that, that's an example of the material plane having a very strong influence on your thought process. And as I mentioned before, the whole goal of the mages, the whole mission, the whole purpose of the mages is to be in control of matter, right? You see that unicorn horn and the 4 legs. The purpose of the mages is to transform matter, to transform this world into the Garden of Eden. Not to run from it, not to fight the demiurge, but to utilize these forces. Because like he says here in this last line, the physical world, in that one has to return to it time and time again, it must hold the key to spiritual development. And this development is surely not to be gained in regarding all physical nature as a trap and a temptation which must be strenuously denied and put away from one. Verse 3, according to esoteric teaching, man descends on the involutionary arc from the planes of spirit, forming functional vehicles on all the descending planes. On the evolutionary arc, it is his destiny to gain control objectively of all the planes in ascending order. Right? I'm not making this stuff up. This is exactly why I said previously, everybody's talking about the astral plane, but no one knows or says anything about the etheric plane. And I was saying yesterday, you can't just skip. Most of the people that think they're astral projecting are only working in the etheric plane. But because the names are getting mixed up, it causes confusion. But in truth, like he says here, as we evolve from spirit into matter, right? As we go through that shift, we have to go back up, because as we come down, we build a body on each of the planes. This is where you get the causal body, the mental body, because you're slowly descending into matter. And to do so, it has to go through a stepping from the causal body to the mental body to the astral body to the etheric body, and finally a physical body. But in order to go back, You have to go back the same way you came down, gaining an awareness of the etheric body, then the astral body, then the mental body, and finally the causal body. But the notion of skipping steps is only going to slow down that process. So he says, on the evolutionary arc, it is his destiny to gain control, objectively, of all the planes in ascending order. The first plane on the evolutionary path, then, is the physical. But how many aspirants to spiritual growth have effective control of it? You got to start with the physical body before you even get to the etheric body. Interesting. (711) says, my Taurus ass be tempted to eat. Yeah. Useless Familiar says, what's the difference between the etheric plane and the astral plane? Well, whole books can be written about the differences, but for the sake of time, we can say that the main difference is level of density, right? What's the difference between your waking life and your dream life? The difference between your waking life and your dream life is the difference between the etheric and the astral. As you can see, most of the time in your dreams, you're still you, and you're still dealing with stuff and people and situations and feelings and all that. It just operates a bit differently. But one thing that we don't remember is how we got there, right? There's a barrier that must be crossed to each plane. You don't remember when you fell asleep, when you lay down to bed, to actually being in the dream. All you just remember is suddenly being aware of the dream. But in the same way, the difference is in a matter of degree. Similar in kind, but different in degree. Society Ejects, peace, welcome. All right, let's keep going. So, on the evolutionary arc, it is his destiny to gain control objectively of all the planes in ascending order. The first plane on the evolutionary path, then, is the physical. But how many aspirants to spiritual growth have effective control of it? All too often, the mystically inclined person is an ineffectual on the physical plane, and so the apparent affinity with things sacred is in reality a running away from and attempted evasion of the next step on the path, the expression of the spirit functioning effectively in the mundane world, which would be called the initiation of the Nadir. Look at that. Look at that. In our numbers, we'll find plenty of people who are using spirituality as an escape, right? And so they get it confused with, a fantasy world. A fantasy world. And this is where a lot of people come in here expecting Harry Potter and, Twilight and X-Men and all that stuff. Because we're looking for a fantasy. But that's not how this is to be used. He says, all too often the mystically inclined person is an ineffectual on the physical plane. That means they don't get anything done on the physical plane. No progress. Just playing with it. He says, all too often the mystically inclined person is an ineffectual on the physical plane, and so the apparent affinity with things sacred is in reality a running away from and attempted evasion of the next step on the path, the expression of the spirit functioning effectively in the mundane world, which could be called the initiation of the Nadir. Number 4, the Yetziratic text of the Sephirah Malkuth shows the importance of the physical world in the divine scheme of things. The 10th path is called the Resplendent Intelligence because it is exalted above every head and sits upon the throne of Binah. There's something to think about. We're dealing with the 10th path, but somehow it sits on the throne of the 3rd path. Let's see how that connects. Useless Familiar, thank you for that donation. I appreciate you. Keisha from Bellies asks, if you create your own life, is there such a thing as still being crossed? Well, that depends. If you're creating your own life, are you creating a lane for that to exist? Are you allowing that to be a part of your world? Because if you are, then the answer would be yes. But if you're like me, I don't really allow that to exist in my space, so I would say there wouldn't be such a thing as being crossed. Let's keep going. 5. The reference to Binah shows that Malkuth is the supreme manifestation of the form which was first conceived as a possibility in the supernal world of Binah. Right? So that's the connection between Binah and Malkuth. Malkuth is the supreme manifestation of the form which was first conceived as a possibility in the supernal world of Binah. In other words, what we see expressed in Malkuth in the physical plane is the final result of the seed, the potential that exists in Binah. So Binah can be seen as the seed realm. Malkuth is the finished product. Because Binah is known as the master of form. It is thus called exalted above every head, for Malkuth is the end result of the divine impulse into manifestation, the spiritual pattern made physically manifest. 6. Its title, the Resplendent Intelligence, is explained in the latter half of the text. It illuminates the splendors of all the lights and causes an influence to emanate from the Prince of Countenances, the Angel of Kether. The lights can be considered either as the divine sparks of men, or else the other 9 Sephirah, which cover the whole gamut of the created being. There is much teaching implied in this short text, for it indicates that physical objective existence is needed before the true potentialities within the spirit of each human being can be drawn forth. It illuminates the splendors of all of us, or should do. Many, it seems, are in the habit of carting around hefty bushels of unreality to hide their lights under. The text really gives a picture of what physical existence should be, and indeed must be before further evolutionary progress can be made. 7. There is also great import in the sentence. It causes an influence to emanate from the Prince of Countenances, the Angel of Kether. The material world can be considered as being a focusing or earthing point for the creative powers of the spirit. For the Angel of Kether is Metatron, the great being superintending the creative world of Kether. Thus, spirit and matter are as great poles in a vast cosmic battery. Each has to be functional before current can flow in the magical circuit between Doth and Yesod. This further implies that all knowledge of spiritual realities can be gained from contemplation of the physical world. That's important. The reflection of the vast countenance in Kether. Again, we come back to the prime hermetic axiom, as above, so below. So as you can see here, coming from the angle of Kabbalah, the physical plane is not evil. It's not a prison. It's not something to be feared, shunned, or run away from. It's actually a system, right? People always say that it's a matrix. This is a simulation. Yeah, those things are true, but it's not something that you're going to find in a movie, right? What we're dealing with here is a cosmic battery, just like he said, it's a cosmic battery. And if we were to look at a battery, we could see that the top of it is positive, the bottom of it is negative, right? I don't have a battery next to me, but you know what a little Duracell Energizer battery looks like. We can imagine the top of that battery as pure spirit, pure consciousness. And then we can see the bottom of that battery as matter. So notice it's connected. Mind and matter are the same thing. Consciousness and matter are the same thing. Purusha Prakriti is the same thing. Adam Kadmon and the tree of life, it's the same thing. Notice he's not actually there, but his presence is what causes matter to form herself as. The tree of life is shaped like this because it has a soul. You're shaped the way that you're shaped because you have a soul. The quality of consciousness within any object is what causes it to manifest the way that it does. So in other words, the quality of consciousness that you work with will have a direct effect on your physical reality. It's not an if or a maybe. That's how it works. Like I said, it's a system. It's an algorithm. That means that there's a pattern to it. That means that there's a process that has to be undergone in order for things to be effective and smooth. If you got two batteries, how many of you guys remember from being young when your toy had to have batteries in it? And sometimes you put it in both of them facing the same way or one wrong and wonder why it didn't work. So I remember being a kid and have to play with the batteries before I figured out, okay, one has to be pointing up and one has to be pointing down. So before that, really I was just guessing and fooling around in a rush, not really trying to understand it, and then getting frustrated because it's not working. But after I learned that there was a process, you have to put the batteries in a special way, I didn't make that mistake again. Likewise, that's what's happening with this physical plane. When you truly understand that soul, God, consciousness, spirit is not somewhere out there, it's actually the other side of yourself, right? If you were a coin, you'd have two sides. If you were a battery, there's a positive pole and a negative pole. Matter's at the bottom, consciousness is at the top. We're the whole thing. So God is not somewhere to be found. The essence of God is what causes you to even be. They're one and the same. So I'll read that again. He says, thus spirit and matter are as great poles in a vast cosmic battery. Each has to be functional before current can flow in the magical circuit between Doth and Yesod. So each one has to be functional between Doth and Yesod. As you can see, the barrier of the abyss. So between this point and this point, there's got to be a functional system. And you see that hexagon, right? You see that six-pointed combination there. How you see reality has to be balanced with how reality actually is, right? The closer that your framework of reality is to what actually exists, the smoother and easier this battery will flow. So if you're wrapped in layers of ignorance and you're behaving against the pattern of nature of reality, you will continue to suffer. And rightfully so. It isn't until you start fixing your thoughts that these things begin to flow properly. I love how this is all connecting, even with the section I just read from the previous book, Inner Space. Peace, Matthew Watson. Peace, T-Dog. Greetings, greetings. Ross says about vibing at a good non-anxious state so you don't attract bad things that your vibe's giving out, like a scent. Absolutely. Cool beans. Useless Familiar says, so matter is just as holy as spirit. Absolutely. And just like what he was saying, so yes, you're absolutely catching it. So the previous few verses, he was talking about how basically the Western influence on society has taught us to demonize sensuality, to demonize the things associated with sensual pleasure. So we often live in our heads or we live in our emotions, and we have this tendency to shun and shy away from physical pleasure. And oftentimes it becomes a vice. It becomes a secret pleasure, right? It begins to turn to a fetish, right? And we get sneaky with it and all these other things because we were taught that it was bad, wrong, naughty, dirty, right? Sensuality in general. So the way that we see it now has been flipped, and we wonder why our world is the way that it is. Well, it's because of the cultural influence of the past, and mainly our demonizing of sensuality. But in doing so, we miss the holiness that is inherent in matter itself. Matter is divine as well. Prakriti is a goddess, right? Mother Nature. She is one and the same as Purusha, just two sides of the same coin. Just like this picture here. You see the masculine, the divine masculine is this figure in the back, not actually there. He doesn't have a body, but we know that he exists because his feminine half, which is the tree itself, is wrapped around him. It clothes him. That's how we know he exists. In other words, we know that God exists because nature is here. We know that our divinity exists because we exist. I hope you catch my drift. So yeah, just like what she said and taught with Shooty, no act or thing in itself is evil or impure, but it's how we approach it and arrange it in our heads. Now that doesn't mean go out and hurt people. Obviously, no one said that. But there's a lot of things that we consider evil and wrong simply because someone told us matter is evil and wrong. It's just like money. When you learn to love matter for what she actually is, she becomes a mother and a lover, right? But if you think about this now, matter is a living, sentient thing. And if you approach matter like, oh, this is dirty, this is shameful, I'm going to keep this a secret. Like if you have all these tangles in your mind about how you organize reality, she's going to treat you the same way. So of course you're out here scared of the demiurge. Of course you're out here scared of people putting curses on you. That's what I said to the young lady in the chat in the comments. It's when you start to structure your reality where that thing is not a possibility, eventually it will no longer be a possibility. Nobody's going to curse me. Nobody's going to attack me. I'm not going to get eaten by the demiurge or the archons or any space vampires or any kind of boogeyman. That doesn't exist in my reality. Now, if you want that in your reality, by all means, do what you want. But you're not going to see me talking about no deep state and what do they call it, QAnon and the president this and mind control that and look what they're doing to us. That don't exist for me. Y'all can keep all that. Because matter is it's a divine entity. And how you approach her is how she's going to organize herself. The whole thing about matter, that's the divine feminine. She structures and organizes herself according to consciousness. So if your consciousness is telling her to organize fear and suffering for you, that's literally what you're going to get. Please hear me. Sabrina Art Life says, what page are we on? This is page 192, and we're on verse 8. Verse 8 of chapter 15. Stray Panther, peace, brother, peace. Philip, peace, peace. All right, you guys following? You guys following with what I'm saying? Are you digging it? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Let me know. So we got this great battery. The battery is a magical circuit between Doth and Yesod. Check this line out. Don't miss this line. This further implies that all knowledge of spiritual realities can be gained from contemplation of the physical world. You know what that means? That means you can focus on anything as a yantra and get a download out of it. Anything. Why is that? Because everything is but an expression of divinity. Every piece of matter is structured and organized and arranged based on a divine cosmic mind. The Kabbalion talks about the all. It's the same thing I'm talking about. The Kabbalion actually got what it was talking about from here and from the Upanishad Tantric Vedic system. But even as he said in Dharana Darshan, in the very beginning of this book, when it's talking about having a psychic symbol, yep, I turned right to the page. Well, I lost it. When he's talking about this psychic symbol, he didn't say go get you a cross or go get you a rosary bead. 25. He actually gave you a long list of things that you could possibly use. It wouldn't be bad to go back over this. But anyways, it doesn't matter what you choose because you can focus on anything. You can focus on anything and tap in. Everything is an expression of the divine, a different angle of the divine. But the point is, you using your mind to focus and hone in and get past the surface level, to see beyond the surface level, right? Ross says, never read books this time, but thankful for Trev. A lot more enjoyable for me. Good, I'm happy to help. I really believe in this information and its importance, so I take seriously having the opportunity to be able to share what I know and what I've learned from this. I know that other people can benefit. I'm seeing you guys benefit. I'm hearing about you guys benefit from this type of information. So, of course, I'm going to keep doing this. Number 8. This revelation has been mentioned by Blake in his Augury of Innocence. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. 9. The various titles of Malkuth, which refer to it as a gate, show that the physical world is a definite stage in spiritual development, or a thing which one must go through. The gate of death and the gate of the shadow of death refer to the great boundaries of Malkuth as far as man's physical existence is concerned, birth and death. By birth, we come into the world, and by death, we go out of it. Birth and death, however, are two sides of the same coin, for when one dies physically, one is born into the higher worlds, and when one is born physically, from the point of view of the higher worlds, one is dead. Man, remember Bobby Hemmett talking about that. He says when a person is born, on the other side they're mourning because it's like a death, which is true, right? Consciousness has to restrict itself and squeeze into a limited form, which is the physical body. So that's a death from the higher planes. And down here, when we die, we mourn, not realizing that that consciousness has now been able to expand closer to its original state. It's a birth on those higher realms. You feel me? Man. Useless Familiar says, so that explains the meme, but what candle do you use? Right, because they're still looking at the surface level, not realizing that you can use any candle. The point is tuning in your focus and getting serious, not playing with it, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, I don't need this or that. I can use anything. Coming from an ego level. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, yes, you can use anything, only to say that the tools themselves are not what is magic. It is the consciousness that you are using, your awareness. That's what the magic is. That's what the work is. Tuning your consciousness to be able to penetrate past the surface level and tap into what's behind the form. If you're doing it like that, it don't matter what candle you use. You can literally be doing a ritual while you're reading, right? You can do for yourself, say, as you read, you may not understand it, but that's not going to stop you because you understand that the information is tapping into your subconscious mind and you're pulling out the meaning of it yourself, right? I keep saying education means to educe, means to pull from within. You're not learning because you're reading these words. I'm not learning because I'm reading these words. I'm learning because as I read, it's pulling out what my consciousness already knows, my higher consciousness. I'm pulling it out. The words are triggering a revelation. So this is a ritual right now. Framestar Film says sacrifice at both entry and exit points. Yes, and see that, yeah, that's good too. The that transition between birth and death, that's relating to the fire element, right? And that's one of the things that the fire element signifies, the transformation from one state of existence to another. That's what the fire element represents. That's what Tifereth represents as the sacrifice. What's being sacrificed? The force or the form. Either you're sacrificing a force in order to squeeze it into a form, or you're sacrificing a form and are able to release the force that is inherent. So yeah, good one, good one. Vincent L. Crystal says psychosymbology. Exactly. Exactly. And so you got to shift your awareness to be able to handle that. And when I say handle that, I mean being able to use that tool. The same way you have to train to use any kind of weapon, right? You don't want to just be out here with something in your hand for the first time and then you don't know how to use it because you're too stressed out. That's what you train and practice for, so that you can use that tool when it needs to be used. And the tool in this case is how you structured your mind. I used to not show his books, but I'm here to give this information to those who are looking for it, to looking to pull it out of themselves. But if you read W.E. Butler, he focuses a lot on getting your mind right, the mindset of the mages. So if you're able to get your hands on these books, this is the one I would even recommend, right? He kicks it off with psychism, illumination, and seership, and he goes into the astral plane. But before all that, he's talking about your psychology, and he goes over it in chapter 4, talking about your psychology and how you approach this thing. Because you can come in here with some foolishness, right? But again, it's like wielding a tool that you haven't trained to use. Sure, you might do what you aimed to do, but you're probably going to hurt yourself or someone else with it. Get your mind right. But that's why we're studying the yoga. Good night, Caesar. Peace. I love this information. I really do. This is good stuff. So yeah, we talked about how birth and death, however, are two sides of the same coin. For when one dies physically, one is born into the higher worlds. And when one is born physically, from the point of view of the higher worlds, one is dead. I remember specifically both Bobby and Panic talking about that from their angle. But we're seeing it here in the black and white. Same message being repeated, and it makes sense. 11. The aspect of Malkuth as the gate of death can be considered in two ways. For there is the gate of the death of the physical body, and the gate of the death of illumination. These two aspects have been admirably explained in the cosmic doctrine. And so one can do no better than to quote the references in full. That's a good book that I don't know, I might be opening this year. Maybe after Mystical Kabbalah, we'll see. But yeah, between Mystical Kabbalah and Cosmic Doctrine, those are like Dion Fortune's two heavy hitters, right? Masterful explanations of occult information, right? But let's see what she said in the Cosmic Doctrine about this gate of death. Physical death. Each individualized consciousness lives to die and dies to live. It is only by death that we can reap the fruits of life. We graze in the fields of earth, and we lie down in the fields of heaven to chew the cud. It has been said, for 1 hour's study, do 3 hours of meditation. Oh man. In death is the soul's meditation, and in life, it's study. Woo! Study and practice, right? We see that go back and forth. Look at what I'll have to read that again so you can catch what he said there. He's giving you this framework basically of study and practice. Realizing that your living life is time for the soul to study, and your death is time for the soul to practice, or in his case, saying that it's time for the soul to meditate. Right? You get it? It's like studying about the Goetia, right? You can study about it all day long, but if you're not going to use it, then what's the point? It's just entertainment. It's collecting information. But I know for myself, I studied Goetia, and I went to test and practice and use what I studied. Back and forth, back and forth. You got to have both of those aspects going, the study and the practice, in order to grow. But as he's demonstrating here, or as she's demonstrating, Dion Fortune, that's happening on an even bigger scale. Your life is the study. Your death is the meditation. The death is the work. The death is the practice. I'll read that again though. Each individualized consciousness lives to die and dies to live. It is only by death that we can reap the fruits of life. We graze in the fields of earth, and we lie down in the fields of heaven to chew the cud. It has been said, for 1 hour's study, do 3 hours meditation. In death is the soul's meditation, and in life, its study. 13. Did you only live all experience? Did you only live? All experiences would pass through consciousness and leave but little impression after the first few pictures had filled all available space. All would become concrete, unrelated, unsynthesized. In the meditation, which is death, the abstract essence of life is extracted. And instead of a million concrete images, there is the abstract concept. Learn to trust death. Learn to love death. Learn to count upon death in your scheme of things, and regularly perform the exercise of visualizing yourselves as dead and conceiving how you shall then be. For thus you will learn to build the bridge between life and death, so that it shall be trodden with increasing ease. See yourself as dead and working out your destiny. See yourselves as dead and continuing your work from the plane of the dead. Thus shall the bridge be built that leads beyond the veil. Let the chasm between the so-called living and the so-called dead be bridged by this method, that men may cease to fear death. Woo! That wasn't even a line from this book. That's Beyond Fortune, man. I'm gonna have to write that down so I can go back over that a couple times. 13. Jeez Louise. Jeez Louise. Hell, I gotta meditate on that one. The practice aspect of it, right? Just like I said, you don't use a tool if you don't know what you're doing. If you try to use it for the first time without learning about it, your success rate is going to be God knows. You might accidentally get it right. More than likely, you're going to break something or hurt yourself or someone else. It's the practice that keeps you calm under pressure. When you practice something repeatedly, you don't have to think about it. Imagine if you spent your life learning how to die, so that when it actually happens, you can easily, she said with ease, you can easily build the bridge between life and death. And she says, imagine yourself doing the work from death. You see what I'm saying? Like, amazing. As you can see, there's no room here for any boogeyman, archon, demiurge, or anything to be afraid of. That's not what time it is. This is about you realizing your totality. Because when you die, you're not going to some faraway place. You're going into yourself. And if you don't know anything about the inner planes, you don't know anything about yourself, then what do you expect to see? What do you expect? How much success do you expect to have? But, everyone here is on the path, so I'm not talking to y'all. Number 14. The spiritual exercise of imagining oneself at death is, of course, a well-known one in the Roman Catholic Church. Also, the practice of going back over the day's happenings just before going to sleep is widely recommended in various esoteric groups, for in this way, much of the abstracting work of death is done in life. It should also be noted that the bridging of the chasm between the so-called living and the so-called dead should be achieved by meditation work within oneself and not by indiscriminate calling back of the dead in the seance room. So the original notion of bridging the gap between the land of the living and the land of the dead It wasn't about trying to talk to spirits for fun. What he says here is this building the chasm between the so-called living and the so-called dead should be achieved by meditation work within oneself, not by indiscriminate calling back of the dead in the seance room. To interfere continually with a dead soul in this way is to risk doing it very great injury, for it may well become earthbound, which accounts for certain types of hauntings. That's got to be some messed up karma for you to just be playing around with spirits and you break someone's slumber and get them stuck in the material plane again. That's awful. That's awful. But, who am I to judge? Everything happens the way it's supposed to. Framestar Film says Anubis's companions beckons us forth once more. That's right. We had a good little discussion about Anubis and Hecate. And here we are talking about death again. All right, so I'm back here on page 183. I just got to read this one more time. I hope you guys don't mind. Verse 13 was literally a ball of fire, spit by the great Dion Fortune, whom I love very much, and I'm very grateful for her contributions, because without it, I would not understand what I'm talking about. Let's go to 13 one more time. Did you only live, all experiences would, basically saying if you only lived and didn't die, didn't continue the work in death. Did you only live, all experiences would pass through consciousness and leave but little impression after the first few pictures had filled the all available space. All would become concrete, unrelated, unsynthesized. In the meditation which is death, the abstract essence of life is extracted, and instead of a million concrete images, there's the abstract concept. Wow. So, just as a visualization, she's saying that you can imagine that your waking life, you're almost like a vacuum cleaner. Has anybody here ever played the game called Katamari Damacy? I used to love that game for the art, for the music, but basically it was a PlayStation game, and you had to roll the joysticks up and down so that he was the space prince, right? And his father got drunk one day and smashed all the stars in the sky. So he was sent to Earth to collect things to create the stars again. So you'd go down with this Katamari, which was this giant, with this little ball that made things stick to it. So you'd start out very tiny, and you'd be rolling this ball, almost like that dung beetle we talked about the other day also. Yeah, that's where they got that from. So you'd roll around that ball, picking up items. And the more items that you picked up, the ball would grow bigger and you'd grow bigger. So you'd go from rolling up paper clips and thumbtacks and, pencils and pens until you're rolling up cars and trees and buildings and then the whole continents, right? You're just rolling up everything. And then you take the Katamari back up to heaven and he turns it into a star. So think of your life, your waking life with your eyes open as this Katamari just rolling around, collecting experience, collecting data, collecting knowledge. Everything that your eyes lay on, everything that your ears pick up, your nose, your taste buds, your skin, the feelings that you have, the relationships, every single thing that you experience. And I'm not just talking about conscious, I'm talking about subconsciously too. So the stuff in the background, the stuff that you pass by as you drive. Imagine that, your whole reality, everything sucked up into this Katamari or this sticky ball or whatever, just work with me here. And the process of death is collecting that sticky ball and extracting the goodies out of it, extracting what's necessary, pulling it out. So you think that death is the end. No, it's the beginning, because you take all of that data that you've collected and it has to be synthesized and processed and digested by your soul. But let's continue with what he says here. If that process didn't happen, he's saying here, all experiences would pass through consciousness and leave but little impression. In other words, what was the point? After the first few pictures had filled the available space, all would be concrete, unrelated, unsynthesized. Without soul, everything going on around here is just meaningless events taking place, right? Man, this is so good. He says, in the meditation, which is death, the abstract essence of life is extracted, and instead of a million concrete images, there's the abstract concept. In other words, our life defines what is in between the moments, right? So if I didn't have my soul, me looking at this book and these unicorns and these tarot cards and all these books, it would be meaningless. It would just be stuff. There's just matter here in different shapes. Likewise with your life, right? The phone in your hand, or you're driving, or the food that you're eating, the bed that you're lying on, or if you're in the gym or whatever, all the stuff would just be meaningless, just unconnected events. But what makes them all connected and special is the fact that you and your awareness is synthesizing a story between them, right? There's a story behind this unicorn pen and this book, these books, this content, right? There's a connection here. It all makes sense. And that's my soul. That's your soul. The fact that everything that you're doing has a purpose and makes sense and the dots all connect. You're bringing that sense made. That's what is extracted. That's the juice of life. That's why it's so important to maintain your frame and get your mind right, because that is the juice that you're taking with you. Tell me you're getting this. Tell me you're understanding what I'm talking about. But he says here, in the meditation, which is death, the abstract essence of life is extracted. And instead of a million concrete images, there's the abstract concept. Learn to trust death. Learn to love death. Learn to count upon death in your scheme of things, and regularly perform the exercise of visualizing yourselves as dead and conceiving how you shall then be. For thus you will learn to build the bridge between life and death, so that it shall be trodden with increasing ease. See yourselves as dead and working out your destiny. See yourselves as dead and continuing your work from the plane of the dead. Thus shall the bridge be built that leads beyond the veil. Let the chasm between the so-called living and the so-called dead be bridged by this method, that men may cease to fear death. Jesus Christ. That explains it right there. Thank you, Sabrina, our life. Thank you. Society Eject says, yeah, so that's why we sleep every night, practicing death every night. Right. Assembling what we have experienced and extracting the meaning behind it. That's what we're doing when we sleep and when we dream. Your dreams are the juice being pulled out of your daily activities. Come on, man. Come on, man. Literally nothing worth my time other than this information here. What else is there to talk about? Like, what else is there to talk about? I'm serious as a heart attack. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Okay, so 15, the death of illumination. In this death, consciousness is withdrawn from the personality and made one with the individuality, and then a man ever beholds the face of his Father, which is in heaven, even when he himself sojourns upon earth. Thus it is that the illuminated initiate is not as other men. Complete initiation is a living death. It ain't sweet. It ain't sweet. You think it's sweet to be enlightened? No. You literally forfeit your membership card of the average person. Alchemy Gold, greetings. So yeah, look what he says there. In this death, the death of illumination, consciousness is withdrawn from the personality and made one with the individuality, and then a man ever beholds the face of his Father which is in heaven, even when he himself sojourns upon earth. Thus it is that the illuminated initiate is not as other men. Complete initiation is a living death. So once you reach this stage and you actually reach unity with God, like this ego, this individuality begins to expand so vast that you literally are face to face with the divine while you're still alive, right? So the individual ego is obliterated as you become one with eternity while you're still alive. And a good way to think of that is imagine that your individual soul, your individual ego and your memories and all that stuff, the life that you consider as you, imagine that's just a drop of water. Now, what happens when that drop of water is dropped into the ocean? Does it still retain its little droplet shape? No. The barriers between the drop of water and that ocean are removed, and there is no difference between the drop and the ocean. Now think about how vast the ocean is compared to a single drop. Once it hits, it's as if it never existed, and it can never come back to what it was. It can never come back. You cannot pull that drop of water out. In the same way, enlightenment is not like, well, maybe I'm enlightened. No, there's levels to it, of course, but when you hit that boundary and cross it, that's that drop of water becoming one with the ocean. Whatever you were before that is just a memory, if that. We're talking about Christ walking the earth, right? He said, I'm on my Father's business. He reached that stage where his individual personality became absorbed in the ocean of God, and there was no difference. That's called the death of illumination. He says the complete initiation is a living death. You die to everyone else. You are no longer that person who you used to be. You're not the kid that your mom raised. You're not the dude from school. You're not the girl from work. You become something completely new. And that is a living death because you can no longer connect to people in the same way. It ain't sweet. I mean, it is sweet in its own way, but from outside looking in, you're gone. Those who desire the things of the senses and the pride of life use the words living death to denote the most terrible fate that can befall man. But those who have knowledge know that the living death means the freedom of the spirit brought through to the plane of matter. Imagine crossing that barrier of spirit and bringing it back. Right? But those who have knowledge know that the living death means the freedom of the spirit brought through to the plane of matter. It means awareness of heaven while dwelling upon earth. Therefore, the initiate goes to the living death, which is freedom whilst still in the body. For death annuls the law of limitation, frees the potentialities of the spirit, gives sight to the blind and power to the impotent. That for which we longed vainly in life, we realize in death. For death is life, and life is death. Too advanced. Too advanced. Jermaine Lewis says the true baptism. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Alchemy Gold asks, have you noticed now that you are completely new, critters, birds, and other animals stay in your yard? Yeah, I do notice that actually. The lizards don't run as much as they used to, at least. And I'm seeing more of them, bigger ones. I usually think that the bigger ones are older and smarter, so they try not to be seen at all. But yeah, I did notice that actually. Interesting. 17. To the wider consciousness, the womb is a grave, and the grave is a womb. The evolving soul, entering upon life, bids farewell to his friends who mourn him, and taking his courage in both hands, and facing the great ordeal, and submitting to suffering, enters upon life. Jeez Louise. His first action in life is to draw breath. His second action with that breath is to set up a cry of distress. because he has entered upon the task of life with grief, and his aim in life is to make life bearable. But when he enters the grave, he passes through a gateway into the wider life of consciousness. And when the initiate would pass to the wider life of consciousness, he passes to it through a gateway, which symbolizes death. And by his death to the things of desire, he obtains freedom. And as one dead, he walks among men. In the death in life, which is the freedom of the spirit in the bonds of the flesh, he transcends the law of limitation. Being dead, he is free. Being dead, he moves with power among those buried in the flesh, and they, seeing the light shining brightly through him, know that he is dead, for the light cannot shine through the veil of flesh. While consciousness is incarnate in the body, the light cannot shine through that consciousness. But when the consciousness is discarnate, the light shines through it. If the discarnate consciousness is still manipulating its body, then that light shines through into the world of matter and illuminates men. But remember this and meditate upon it. The illuminated initiate is a dead man who manipulates his body that they may thereby serve those who cannot otherwise be approached. Somebody understood that. Somebody understood that. I'll read it one more time, but remember this and meditate upon it. The illuminated initiate is a dead man who manipulates his body that he may thereby serve those who cannot otherwise be approached. There are others who cannot be approached, and I'm not talking about human people. We're talking about something much bigger. Somebody understood. Alkana Moose says, you're quoting directly from Cosmic Doctrine by Dion Fortune. Yes, exactly. Nuru, greetings, peace. Society Eject says, yo, lol, that's why babies come out crying. It's the soul spirit realizing that it's back on earth, and that's the only way for it to express itself. Yeah. The illuminated initiate is the dead man who manipulates his body that he may thereby serve those who cannot otherwise be approached. Gotta understand it. Got to understand it. It's not what you think it is. There's a line here which I wish I could pull up. But the quote is something of the tune to I learn in order to serve, basically. So truly, as you get more advanced with this information, and when I say advanced, I mean you really start living it, it becomes less and less about trying to get stuff, right? This process becomes less and less about trying to get money and get sex and make life all Hollywood. That's not what this is about. This is about this as above, so below, this transformation of matter. We're talking about all of matter, including mankind, right? People. I learn so that I may serve. Service is the root here. Gratitude, compassion, service, love. That's what happens when you get to this point. You don't bring dense selfishness to this level. It just doesn't, it's just not, it just doesn't vibrate the same. It just doesn't line up with the pattern. It doesn't exist at this point. And when I say at this point, I mean specifically getting around to like the upper triad area of realization, of consciousness. Because you start to understand there is one soul. And service is an act to yourself. It's a different level. It's not selfishness as in the ego trying to preserve itself. Like what he's saying here, when that drop of water enters the ocean, there is no more drop. The drop is forever gone. But you realize that you are the ocean, so it only makes sense for the ocean to serve itself, to help itself grow. All the other people walking around have the same soul, buried underneath layers and layers of attachment, ego, ignorance, of course. But what if you had the tools to help people become liberated? What if you had the tools to point people in the direction of liberation? What can you shape and build? What greater to shape and build than maybe somebody's path to enlightenment, to somebody's path of liberation, to somebody's path of having their eyes opened? Now, that doesn't always happen by you beating them down with this information. Matter of fact, that doesn't work. But it works when you're able to shape your life into something that's a blessing, not only to yourself, but to others. It helps when you're able to do that because people want you to show them, not tell them. It takes a special kind of person to sit down here and listen to a lecture on the occult or to listen to a book reading. I promise you, none of your friends and family would sit down and do this. So it's not going to come through talking. It'll come through action, though. It'll come through service. And that's what we dealt with here when we studied this, karma and karma yoga. So you're not being good and well-behaved so that you can get a treat from Cosmic Daddy. No. You're doing this because you realize you are Cosmic Daddy. Fantastic stuff. I mean, absolutely. Alcanamu says, in leche, I am another yourself, Jose Arguelles. Let's keep going, because I have a feeling that these aren't the only gems in this chapter. I think there might be quite a few. For him to get those first couple ones out the way that fast, that means he's making room for more, I can tell. Let's keep going. Alex, peace. 18. This passage refers, of course, to the fully initiated adept, and these are few. These are few. This passage refers, of course, to the fully initiated adept, and these are few. Even so, this does not mean that the adept goes about lit up like a Christmas tree with pineal gland ablaze like the headlights on a car. The light is the inner light of illumination, and through it though it profoundly affects all who come into his environment, it will affect them unconsciously, and they will frequently react with hostility, right? It will be remembered that even Jesus of Nazareth, the most illuminated of men, was laughed at in Nazareth, where his own kin and neighbors could not overcome their preconceptions about his humble, familiar origin due to long habit. And in the city of Jerusalem, he was first hysterically feted and subsequently just as hysterically scourged and done to death. That's what we can expect if you're trying to go around teaching people about the holy science, right? It's not your job to do that. Keisha from Belly says, so if you start to fully understand, you awaken in the midst of life, you've been living backwards, how to balance it as far as taking care of yourself. Well, there's the thing, right? This is the process that we've been going through on the book study that is gradually leading one to an understanding of that process. I'll start by saying you might want to check out this book, The Path of Poverty and Nivriti. This is where we started. I would suggest getting this. It's a very thin book, but it does illustrate how you begin the process of self-analysis and identifying what is the path of being involved in the world and what is the path of being involved in the spirit. There's two different paths. One is called pravriti, going within the vrittis, nivriti, going out of the vrittis. Vrittis represent these ripples in consciousness, right? In other words, just analyze how your mind is acting and behaving, right? I'll say it briefly here. For the most part, your mind, your ego, your awareness is pressed outwards. So you're identifying with the things in your environment, right? So you're looking at, you're smelling, tasting, and thinking about all this stuff in the world, right? Whether it's drama, whether it's good times, your awareness is always pressed outward. But the thing we have to realize is, to follow the path of spirit, the awareness must be turned inwards. So instead of being so concerned and wrapped up and involved in external reality, you got to learn how to become involved in internal reality, which means being still, right? We're talking about meditation, which is being still and paying attention to the contents of your mind. Not just reviewing the day, not just thinking about what you want to do tomorrow, but come outside of yourself and observe yourself. Observe how you breathe. Observe the fact that distracting thoughts do arise. They just pop up. Now, there's nothing you can do to stop them. But if you just observe them, you're going to naturally see that that is the nature of mind. You're going to start to see that what you actually are, this observer, this soul, is actually something different from the body, something different from the mind. And when I say different, I got to use my words carefully because it's all actually one thing. But for observation purposes, you're going to notice that the body is literally a vessel, right? Here it is, chilling, doing its thing. And then if you keep paying attention, you're going to see that the mind is also a vessel, and it's doing its thing. Then if you zoom out just a little bit more, you start to see that consciousness is expanded past that. Consciousness is actually aware of the mind and aware of the body. The more time that you spend in this process, analyzing the self like that, the more familiar you're going to get with the difference between spirit and matter. Most people don't know the difference. They think they do. But how can you know the difference if you've only ever been focused externally? So I hope that answers your question. That's probably the best thing that I can say to start balancing this process. And like I said, grab that book, The Path of Poverty and Nivriti. Alkana says, thank you so much for this. Sometimes I felt I was the only one studying along these lines. Good night. Have a good night. Let's keep going. Ross says, cap equipped, green coat on, glasses and all. I'm not sure what that was referring to. So yeah, basically he's talking about the verse that says a prophet is not respected in his own hometown. As we've seen, even Christ was like the most illuminated person to walk the earth, right? So to speak, whatever, so to speak. But even him, in his enlightenment, was still laughed out of his hometown. The people that knew him since he was a kid, they could only see him as the carpenter's son who was born in that stank manger with all those donkeys and cows and chickens. Oh, you mean him? Him over there? He's supposed to be some kind of ascended master, some kind of enlightened guru person? Get out of here. I remember when he was born in that funky manger. Nah, he can't be the one, not him, right? No matter what he says, does, or demonstrates, their attention is so focused on the external world that they cannot see the spirit. They can't see the light. The light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. This is what we're talking about here. So if you think you're going to go and teach your friends and family about this information, Jesus couldn't even do it. So this is what I'm saying, it's not your job. And then we saw what happened at the end. Them people were salty about him from the get-go. And it serves as an example, as an archetype, to understand how this works. So let's continue. 19. That, in kind if not in degree, is very much the reception the modern adept receives. Though he is unlikely to be physically persecuted nowadays, he usually meets with indifference, mockery, or hostility on the one hand, and exaggerated reverence on the other. That's what we get. That's what we get when we walk this path. Those are the two ways that people are going to treat you, right? And we're talking about just regular people who also are so focused on the external. He says that's the reception that the modern adept receives. Though he is unlikely to be physically persecuted nowadays, he's usually met with indifference, mockery, or hostility. You know, these people be talking about you behind your back. Oh, he done went crazy. He talking about some devil worshiping stuff, man. I don't want nothing to do with that, right? Indifference, mockery, hostility. Trust me, I've been getting that for a long time. I'm numb to it at this point because I know better. They're only using what they can understand, right? So it's not even no hard feelings against these people either. What did Christ say? Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So you're usually going to be met with indifference, mockery, or hostility on one hand, and on the other hand, exaggerated reverence, right? Because you might be somebody might be using you as a symbol for divinity. Somebody might be using you as a symbol for access to their own inner spirit because they don't know how to find it within themselves. So they see this person who might seem to be very spiritual or very knowledgeable about spiritual things, and so they're going to raise his status in their minds. I hope y'all are picking this up. This is good stuff. 20. The reference to Malkuth as the Gate of Tears emphasizes its connection with the Sephirah Binah. Spiritual experience is the vision of sorrow. The understanding of sorrow is one of the lessons of Malkuth, and it must be realized that it has nothing to do with self-pity or sentimentality, which are the roots of most human sorrow. The full realization is implied by the division made by the abyss. It is the divine sorrow which comes with the delays and separations implicit in evolution and in the development of form. It is perhaps best expressed in the German word Weltschmerz. So when it's talking about the gate of sorrow, it doesn't mean self-pity or sadness like that. It's not talking about sentimentality and connection. It's divine sorrow which comes with the delays and separations implicit in evolution and in the development of form. So a good way to think about that is, remember we said that Binah holds the seed of the form that is fully expressed in Malkuth. So in Malkuth, we've got the expression of the thing. And in Binah, we've got the seed of it. So get this. The seed knows what it's to become. The seed knew that when Christ was to be born, right? Mary, Mara, the great seed, Mother Mary up here, she knew that when Christ was going to be born, he was going to do great things, and that's good. He was also going to suffer, and that sucks. So we're talking about that kind of sorrow. At this point, she sees it all before it's manifested. So we're seeing it as doth. We're seeing it before it's manifested. So the sorrow is, before my baby's even born, I know what he has to go through, and I'm already having sorrow about that. That's what the vision of sorrow means. So once it's actually born, it has to play out its life from beginning to end. The mother knowing something that the baby doesn't. She just does her best to nurture him and care for him. That's what it's talking about with the vision of sorrow. We're talking about consciousness knowing what it has to go through when it becomes matter. Consciousness knowing that, okay, I'm going to have to take a body, a form, and I'm going to have to go through this long journey of reincarnation, right? I'm going to have to go through all this karma. I'm going to have to deal with these people and these things. I'm going to have to deal with all this imbalance for so many lifetimes until the mission is complete. Until I've completely liberated myself after completely involving myself. Framestar Film says a lack of understanding of reality usually leads to mockery of those that actually endeavor to seek true reality. Right, right. And we see this lack of understanding of reality every day. Just look around, right? Just look at how people behave to polarizing topics. Vaccination, for example, the vaccine. You got some people over here calling the unvaccinated idiots and fools, and you should obviously know. Then you got the other side saying, hey, you guys are being manipulated by the media. You should know, you're the idiots. It's going back and forth, back and forth. Just so polarized. Neither side seeing the actual truth, right? So caught up and wrapped up in the nonsense, missing the point. Just like we see with people who talk about the, government drama that happens, or the acting drama, your Will Smith, your Chris Rock, or whatever is going to be showing up this week, this month, because it's on a rotation. There's no space to breathe. There's always going to be something new to be polarized about, scattered about. Time wasters, energy wasters. That's a lack of understanding of reality. Getting caught up in that nonsense, that's a lack of understanding of reality. Let's continue. ZJ says, the world of duality. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. 23. Nope, I think we need to go back up. 21. The gate of justice is a reminder that it is in earth conditions that karma is usually worked out. The average soul being largely in a subjective or even unconscious state while it's dead to the physical world. So when it's called the gate of justice, we're talking about karma here, right? It's a reminder that in earth, karma is usually worked out. That's one of the main points of having this physical manifestation, so that the karma can work itself out, so that the imbalance can balance itself, so that cause and effect can play. The average soul being largely in a subjective or even unconscious state whilst dead to the physical world. 22. Prayer is an active result of the act of faith, as Malkuth is of Binah, the parent of faith. So this is probably the basis of the title assigned to Malkuth, the Gate of Prayer. The title Gate of the Garden of Eden refers, of course, to the original state of perfect creation to which the earth must attain once more under the symbolism of the New Jerusalem. So as it says right there, earth, the physical plane, Malkuth Asaya, it's not something to run from. It's not something to be fought against, right? It's not any of that. We're living in a place whose potential is the perfect Garden of Eden. Where we live right now, this world is the potential for the perfect Garden of Eden. But guess who's going to make it that way? Your president, your favorite actor, your favorite musician? No, it's the job of the mages. I'm here on my father's business. There's nothing else that is worthy of my attention. At least that's the mindset of our mages. It doesn't stop when the camera quits rolling. It doesn't stop when the book closes. It's a 24/7, and even beyond that, because we're even doing the work in the dream state. '23. The remaining titles, the inferior mother, the queen, the bride, the virgin, have the common denominator of femininity. This attribution is obvious when one considers that Malkuth is receptive to all the higher emanations of the tree, right? So we undoubtedly Like, without any type of debate, Malkuth is seen as feminine because Malkuth is receiving all the influences from the tree. Everything is coming down into Malkuth. Whether you're talking about the water element or earth or magnetism, it's all gathering and collecting in Malkuth. So that's why Malkuth is seen as the inferior mother, the queen, the bride, the virgin. That's the feminine aspect, the divine feminine. The queen and the bride are references to the relation of Malkuth to Tifereth, the king and the lesser countenance, the harmony of which Sephirah must become manifest in Malkuth, which is also the cross of dense matter upon which the spirit is crucified. Thus, we have a further link with Tifereth in the mysteries of the crucifixion. So the equal-armed cross is associated with Malkuth because of the four elements, right? Golgotha. The inferior mother indicates again the link with Binah, the supernal mother. And the title of virgin could be applied either to the pristine condition of the Garden of Eden or to the condition of earth before becoming the bride of Tifereth. Most of these feminine titles are assumed in the magical image of Malkuth, which is that of a young woman, crowned and throned. The throne is really that of Binah, and the maiden can be identified with the goddess of the earth, such as Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, the earth mother. And remember, I showed this card here at the beginning of this chapter. As soon as the magical symbol was a woman seated, crowned, and throned, this is the Empress card. Now, the throne is known of as Binah, right? So can you guess where this tarot card is on the Tree of Life? A woman. Look, she's got a crown on her head. She's sitting on a throne, right? She's clothed with potential, and she's pregnant. Those are all Kabbalistic signs right there. We got Kether above her. We got Binah to her left. We got the outpouring energy of Chakma to her right. She's holding up the scepter of power. This is where the magician card is. Look at the field of wheat beneath her. Abundant potential. The earth is pregnant with her influence. But why is this important? Number one, because this is the number 3. Number 3 is related to Binah, the third sphere, right? That's why she's pregnant. Binah. And not to mention, there's also Venus influence here. Netzach. But this is the path that's located next to Binah. Binah connecting Chakma. That's why this is an important reference to what he's talking about there. The connection between Malkuth and Binah. Right. Basically what I mean by that is right here in the beginning, as you can see, we're talking about Binah right here. It is the Empress card that we just looked at is right here, connected from Binah to Chakma. So we got that river pouring down. We got the throne she's sitting on. We've got that wand that she's holding up right here. Where's it at? Yeah, here we go. Right, she's got the crown on her head that represents Kether. Waterfall over here, the pouring out of that energy. The throne that she's sitting on, right here. Etc., etc. "12 stars on her head. That's another sign dealing with Chakma, right? The zodiac. Good stuff. let's continue. By the way, if you guys are with me in memorizing this information, a good homework assignment for you would be to memorize where the major arcana are on the tree. That's going to be very helpful for you moving forward, because you're going to be able to pull this stuff by recall right to memory. And that's just going to help you learn deeper, quicker, because you're going to have something to relate to. You feel me? So just take a moment. It's easy to find where the cards are on the tree. My big recommendation is to get this book, The Qabalistic Tarot, if you can. This makes it so easy for you. If not, you can just find all over the internet different pictures of how the tarot cards line up with the tree. It's not difficult. But as homework, if you're watching my channel and taking this information seriously, and you really want to be able to understand it and use it in your life, your homework assignment is going to be to memorize where the cards go, right? The Fool up here, the Magus up here, the Empress here, right? When you become aware of the placement of the cards, then you can start contemplating, well, what did the two cards connect? That's going to start to describe the type of force that you're dealing with. So the Magus card connects Kether and Binah. That tells you the power associated here. Likewise, from Kether to Chakma, the Fool card, that tells you what that process looks like. Now, this balancing between Binah and Chakma, that's the Empress card. That's why she's pregnant. Divine masculine, divine feminine. You know what time it is. That's why she's pregnant. Etc., etc. Society Eject says, yep, even the colors match. You can't make this stuff up. Right, bro. Right. And if we wanted to take it even deeper, we could look at the color scales that have been listed to find out which world this power is operating in. Right? Because the color scheme, we learn at the beginning of every chapter, the Sephirah have a color scheme. So if we learn what color scale it's in, we can learn at what level these forces are having their strongest influence in. But as a hint, you can see that we're dealing with the same reality here. See those colors, all the shared colors here? We're dealing with the same reality. I would even say the Fool card. We're all dealing with that upper triad. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Alchemy Gold asks, Binah's Empress is Saturn. So Binah is represented by the throne, and the path connecting Binah to Chakma, that path is represented by the Empress card. So every piece of this tree is can be represented by a tarot card. The path between here and here is represented by the tarot card Empress. Okay, so 26. The god name of the Sephirah Malkuth is Adonai Melech, the Lord who is king, or Adonai Ha-Aretz. Adonai Ha-Aretz, the Lord of earth. And it must be remembered that Adonai is a holy emanation of God, just as Eheye or any other of the names. Thus Malkuth is in no wise less holy than Kether, for it is an expression and manifestation of the same force. If this fact had always been remembered, there would have been less unhealthy and pathological forms of asceticism in the history of religion and mysticism. This fact can be seen in the dogma of the Roman Church of the physical assumption into heaven of the Virgin Mary. There is great spiritual truth behind this dogma, which becomes evident when one remembers the magical image and feminine titles of Malkuth and also its destiny. The archangel of the sphere is Sandalphon, and his colors are citrine, olive, russet, and black. That's easy to remember because those are the colors that you see of Malkuth on the cover of this book. Citrine, olive, russet, and black. Maybe this is the real reason why Crayola came out with that 64 pack of crayons and 72 pack color of crayons. Because I know all those colors are in that pack. So, the archangel of this sphere is Sandalphon, and his colors are citrine, olive, russet, and black. A good idea of these colors can be gained from looking at the skin of an apple. This archangel is the guide or intelligence of the planet Earth, and herein lies teaching of very great importance. Very great importance. So again, I'll reference to my chart, which I have not erased yet. Right? So we're dealing with who you are right now, what's just under the surface, who you were, your childhood memories buried within the hereditary memory, buried within the racial memory. Then we get to the human race memory, which is the collective unconsciousness, and we keep going until we get to Sandalphon. Sandalphon is this representation, this guardian, the intelligence of the planet Earth. We're dealing with Sandalphon. So it isn't separate, it's actually buried within us. Contact with all of these different deities and intelligences, it's within you already. But in order to access that information, you've got to start to still the body and still the mind and still the emotions, learn discernment and non-attachment. And once you take that into your meditation, you can start to penetrate into this information that is stored in the collective unconscious. This is what happens with the genius that's making all these inventions. They don't think of it, they see it. They see that it already exists somewhere, and they pull it up and pull it out of their subconscious. They educe it. That's like I said, when I'm reading these books, I'm not learning from these words. The words are triggering something in me to be pulled up from the surface. That's what learning, that's what education is. So this archangel is the guide or intelligence of the planet Earth, and herein lies teaching of very great importance. 28. The formation of the planetary spheres is a subject which belongs more to a treatise on esoteric cosmogony than to an outline of the Kabbalah. However, it can be said, briefly, that the planetary spheres were formed one after the other by the earliest evolutions, the Lords of Flame. Form and mind. Excuse me. However, it can be said, briefly, that the planetary spheres were formed one after the other by the earliest evolutions, the Lords of Flame, Form, and Mind, who built the initial stresses and structures of form. Each planet was built first on a certain level. For example, Jupiter on the plane of the denser spiritual levels, Mercury on the plane of abstract mind, Saturn, concrete mind, Venus, the higher emotions, Mars, the instinctual and passional levels, and the Earth and its moon on the etheric, physical. Subsequently, each planet develops the lower sheaths or vehicles so that they all manifest physically and can be seen in the night sky. So this information, as he's saying, these intelligences, right? They manifest on specific planes, and that's why they rule specific planes. Honestly, if you want a shortcut to understand astrology, you should probably write that down. He just pointed out the where each of these planets have an influence, because that's the sphere that they are actually existing on. Not the physical plane is not the original home of Venus and Jupiter and all that other stuff. That's not the original home. The original home is on the plane that these influences reside in. But of course, we're going to see a physical manifestation. Just like the plane that your higher self resides on is different than the plane that your ego resides on. It's different from the plane that your body mind resides on. But we're learning to unify these planes so that they work in harmony with each other and not against each other. I'll read that one more time. Each planet was built first on a certain level. For example, Jupiter on the plane of the denser spiritual levels, Mercury on the plane of abstract mind, Saturn, concrete mind, Venus, the higher emotions, Mars, the instinctual and passional levels, and the Earth and its moon on the etheric and physical. You're getting everything you need to know right here. I hope you're able to use it. Subsequently, each planet develops the lower sheaths or vehicles so that they'll all manifest physically and can be seen in the night sky. So that comes last, right? That's not first, that's last. Each one, though, has to rely on the entities inhabiting it for the higher levels of it to be built. So in other words, the evolution of the earth has everything to do with us, right? It works together. We work together. Nobody's ascending and evolving by themselves. This is rising up from our subconscious mind. So we're rising together. And what he's talking about there is it's up to the planet's inhabitants to build the higher levels of the planet itself. We do that through the collective unconscious. We do that through the planetary consciousness. We do that through the archangels and the angels in the God name. We're connected to these things. That's why these things are able to influence us. Not because a spirit from nowhere came out and did something to you, but because that spirit is a part of you in your subconscious mind, influencing you. And when I say that spirit, guess what? That spirit is part of what you call your spirit. Peace, MC Maestro. Framestar Film says, veils of energy cloaking as they cascade over those below. Yes. 29. The practical implication of this is that the etheric physical structure of the earth, which is built out of the projections of consciousness of elemental entities, relies on humanity to put it in touch with spiritual realities. It's our job, once again. Look, I can't say it enough. That's what's happening here in this card. This is what we do. So he says, the practical implication of this is that the etheric physical structure of the earth, which is built out of the projections of consciousnesses of elemental entities, which aren't just the elementals. I'm willing to wager that means us as well, because we're composed of the elements. But he says the etheric physical structure relies on humanity to put it in touch with spiritual realities. It's our job to put the physical plane in touch with the spiritual plane. As the elementals are creations of the created, that is, they are units of consciousness created by the evolutions of flame, form, and mind, and not by their own development from the spiritual reality of the great unmanifest. They are doomed to extinction at the end of a day of manifestation, unless they have picked up spiritual vibration by that time. And the only way they can do this is through the mediation of humanity. As the majority of humanity seems blissfully ignorant of its own spirituality, let alone the existence of the elemental kingdoms, it will be obvious that the plight of these elemental entities is a grave one. This sounds familiar. Pretty sure we went over something very similar to this. But basically, there are life forms that are just below the human intelligence, and we call these the elementals, right? They are evolving as well, and they evolve through working with us. yet another symbolic event that's happening here. Those four tools on the table represent those elementals. Now, as the magician, the magus, the witch, or whatever you want to call it, works with elementals to do magic, that serves as a training process for them so that they may evolve past their current state. That's another secret job of the magus, is to educate not just human beings, but also elementals, to put them in order, to arrange them. Now, I believe that this is definitely what we're talking about with the Goetia. This is definitely what Christ was talking about in Luke chapter 10 or 11, I want to say. You're not here to fight these things. You're here to help them. Not be scared of them. But like he was saying here, as the majority of humanity, well, I'll go back one more sentence. If they don't pick up spiritual vibration, then they will become extinct, basically, right? They're doomed to extinction at the end of a day of manifestation unless they have picked up spiritual vibration by that time. And the only way they can do this is through the mediation of humanity. As the majority of humanity seems blissfully ignorant of its own spirituality, let alone the existence of the elemental kingdoms, it will be obvious that the plight of these elemental entities is a grave one. 30. The sum total of all these elemental entities, which hold together the etheric stresses of the planet, is called the planetary being. So the sum total of all these elemental entities we've been talking about, the total of them, which hold together the etheric stresses of the planet, is called the planetary being. So here's the thing now. You're not just helping elementals. The elementals are only fragments of this massive planetary being. The elementals are how we interact with the planetary being, because we can't comprehend the planetary intelligence as it is. It's extremely difficult to have just a direct two-way conversation with planetary intelligence. That's where the middle man factor comes into play. That's where the symbol comes into play. That's where the yantra comes into play. That's where the Goetia comes into play. You see what I mean? In some cosmogonies, it is referred to as the planetary spirit, but in the light of the facts just stated, the title is a misleading one, for it has no inherent contact with spirit. The archangel Sandalphon is its guide, for he holds the concept of what it should become. And this concept, which has objective existence on its own level, can be called the planetary entity. However, the bridge between planetary being and planetary entity has to be built by humanity itself, and this constitutes one of the tasks of the initiated adepts, see? Though it is really the responsibility of all humanity, right? But in this case, the big brothers and big sisters have to pull the heaviest part of the load because the rest of humanity is completely clueless on the subject. Good stuff. Alchemy Gold says, wow, we work together with the elementals to put them in order, the commodity. Absolutely. You got it. Because again, they're pieces of the whole, which we can't even fathom. And this is also happening in yoga, right? They're called bhutaganas. I posted a link, but this constitutes Shiva's army, right? These elementals are the army of Shiva, basically. We're talking about the Goetia as well. So these things are to be tamed and put into order. Not fought and destroyed or ran from or demonized. Because when you think about it, if you're demonizing and running away from spirits and Goetia and demons and all that stuff, you're running away from the planetary intelligence that you live on. You're demonizing that. To misinterpret this information, you're misinterpreting what planetary intelligence is and its relationship with you. 31. The planetary being is helped much by the right attitude to earthly things. That is, the right attitude to earthly things. The planetary being is helped much by the right attitude to earthly things. That is, the application of spiritual principles in ordinary life. The ethic of Malkuth, order and efficiency, has to be consciously pursued all day long, and it is little use inducing it for short periods only as in ritual working, or regarding the task grudgingly as a duty or convention. Right? So it's no good to just kind of do it every now and then, and it's no good to do it just because you feel like you have to. But doing it because you know it's the right thing to do and you want to do it. You want to do it. That's the proper application of the spiritual principles in ordinary life. Also, the planetary being cannot be helped much by intellect. You see that also? The planetary being cannot be helped much by intellect, for it has no mind, but it is contacted and helped by what might be called the constant dedication of the instincts. This does not apply only to the sexual instinct, but also to the taking of food and the tilling of the earth to make it bring forth fruits, for all these are sacramental in their correct understanding, and the life of the adept is dedicated to the greater glory of God and man and planetary being. (32) In all these considerations, the distinction must be borne in mind between Earth as a planet, Earth as one of the four elements, and Earth as Malkuth. So we got three different references of Earth, right? Three different versions of what's being talked about. He says, in all these considerations, the distinction must be borne in mind between Earth as a planet, Earth as one of the four elements, and Earth as Malkuth, the physical plane of the whole universe. The physical plane of the whole universe. That's what Malkuth is. Malkuth is not just the earth that you stand on. Malkuth, what Malkuth actually is the physical plane of the whole universe. Please keep that in mind. Thus, the traditional archangel of Malkuth is Metatron, the same being who is the archangel of Kether, which again shows the strong link between spirit and spirit as matter. So the strong link between spirit as spirit and spirit as matter. Sandalphon is really the archangel of the planet Earth, and the archangel of the element of Earth is Uriel. Okay. So again, up here, what he said was that there was three different distinctions to be made about Earth as a planet. Now, let's see. Earth as a planet, we can say that's ruled by Sandalphon. Then he says Earth is one of the four elements. That's ruled by Uriel. And then Earth is the entire universe. Now we're dealing with Metatron. Interesting. Interesting. 32. That's what we read. 33. Uriel is one of the great archangels of the four quarters. In the east is Raphael, in the south is Michael, in the west is Gabriel, in the north, Uriel. The first three archangels have already been described. Uriel is a great figure built up with the dark greens and browns of earth, and who, in his inner aspects, represents the prime evil light of God himself, and who is much concerned with the great teachers who have periodically come to earth. Thus, in the east is the great source of healing, in the south, the great source of balance and protection. In the west, we have great source of vision, and in the north, we have the great source of teaching. Uriel is also connected with Mikhail as a great balancing force and is behind the great cataclysms of Earth, such as are described in the legends of Atlantis, Sodom, and Gomorrah. 34. In building up the forms of the archangels of the four quarters, they are best conceived as great fortresses or towers, colored in the active colors of the element concerned. In other words, yellow, red, blue, green, respectively, as opposed to the passive colors, blue, dark, red, silver. Let's see, blue, dark, red, silver. I think this may answer a question. And black. I wonder if that's why the color scheme is different for the four elements with Franz Barden. Because with the Hermetic path, we know that yellow for air, red for fire, blue for water, green for earth. But Franz Barden does it slightly differently. I believe that the water is yellow and the air is green, I want to say. But it says, in building up the forms of the archangels of the four quarters, they are best conceived as great fortresses or towers, colored in the active colors of the element concerned. So you want to see them in yellow, red, blue, and green, as opposed to the passive colors. Interpenetrating all. There we go. Interpenetrating all can be conceived the archangel Sandalphon in citrine, olive, russet, and black, pulsing with the slow vibrations of earth. One can also build up the kings of the elemental forces, surrounded by the lesser denizens of the elemental, in whatever form most appeals to the imagination. The king represents what might be called the spiritually illuminated elemental. In the east is the air king, Paralda, presiding over the sylphs. He can be pictured as standing in eddies of air, which are almost like the waves of the sea standing up right on end, air and wind streaming from him in radiant light. In the south is the fire king, Jinn, presiding over the salamanders. He can be pictured with waves of heat surging up around him and points of fire and flame searing the atmosphere and reaching toward the ceiling. In the west is the water king, Nixa, presiding over the Undines. He can be pictured permeated with moisture and currents of foam swinging around his feet and pouring from his aura. In the north is the Earth King, Gob, presiding over the gnomes. He can be pictured with waves of earth power, not so much an idea of soil as an intermediate state of matter, slow-moving but vastly strong. The elements can be conceived of as forming a great equal-armed cross, which is a symbol of the elements and of the Sephirah Malkuth. And in the center of the cross, one can picture the rose of the world, which slowly blooms with the development of the elementals, and whose dew falling helps these beings to manifest. A whole treatise could be written on the subject of the elementals alone, for, like humanity, they form a whole evolution, as diverse as humanity is diverse. As diverse as humanity is diverse. Although they share the planet Earth with man, they are little known or acknowledged by man, save in folklore or literature. We who are old and gay, oh so old, thousands of years if all were told. W.B. Yeats. Nehru says, during samadhi, you enter a bliss state. Lines blur between this and that, and you enter an electrical nadi, or channel, between you, Earth, Sun cosmos, strengthening gravity itself. Gravity is Earth, Sun, samadhi. In order to avoid superstition, one must remember that the forms assigned to them are man-made. Let me read this again, because it's easy to miss. In order to avoid superstition, one must remember that the forms assigned to them are man-made. What is required, however, is recognition of their existence, and this is best done by an intelligent use of primitive anthropomorphism and animism. So questions are arising here, right? You've got your ancestor altar with the pictures and the stuff that you donate and the ancestor money. I wonder what's actually happening here. The forms of these elementals are man-made. The four cardinal points, or quadrants, also can be considered under the astrological headings of fixed, cardinal, and mutable. The fixed aspect is the temperament of the quadrant and is based on the nature of one of the four holy living creatures of Kether. The cardinal aspect is the great intelligence behind the quadrant, which is the ruling power of the archangel. The mutable aspect is ruled by the elemental kings, who work through change. Cool. So 43. The order of angels of Malkuth, the Asham, or souls of fire, can be considered as the atomic consciousnesses, which hold physical matter together, and the mundane chakra, the sphere of the elementals, has been adequately covered above. 44. The spiritual experience of Malkuth is the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. The holy guardian angel is often confused with the higher self or individuality, which is Doth, Chesed, Gibur, and Tifereth, behind the lower self or personality, Netzach, Had, Yasad, Malkuth. 45. In the very early days of manifestation, before humanity had started upon the journey of evolution, the divine plan was projected by the mind of God into the consciousness of the swarm of divine sparks, which constituted the basis of humanity. With the coming of evolutionary life, the swarm broke up to act as individual units, and at the same time, the conception of the divine plan also broke up, a small piece going with each divine spark. This, of course, is very much in metaphorical terms, but the implications are of very real import. The true spiritual experience of the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel is no astral vision, but an awareness of the true destiny that each human being has to fulfill as his evolutionary task. So not Harry Potter, not explosions and fireworks, no angel that's talking to you, but a realization of the evolutionary task that every human being has. Framestar Films says God's egregore. Oh boy. Knowledge and conversation. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. I certainly do. This is good quality data. These last few chapters have to be kind of chewed slowly. Big bites. So yeah, the Holy Guardian Angel is no astral vision, but an awareness. Oh, okay, let's keep going. An awareness of the true destiny that each human being has to fulfill as his evolutionary task. When you become aware of your purpose, usually this will manifest as an inner urge within a man, like a demiurge, like it's kind of an urge, but like a demi one, right? And such a one goes through physical life with a mission. He is a man of destiny. Occasionally, this impulsion to a definite form of activity may be conceived as a separate entity, as in the case of Socrates and his daemon, right? Which was probably an aspect of his holy guardian angel. 47. The subsidiary symbols of Malkuth include the magic circle and the triangle of evocation, which imply the actual manifestation of magical work. The magic circle is the area of delimitation that the magician chooses to work in, and the triangle is the area to which he conjures an entity to appear. This is more of symbolic than practical importance, for the etheric evocation of discarnate entities is a very low form of magic, little used nowadays. I'll read that again in case you missed it. The etheric evocation of discarnate entities is a very low form of magic, little used nowadays. The information in these Kabbalah books has completely revolutionized how I understand the Goetic spirits. I mean, completely. 48. The altar of the double cube is a six-sided figure, though having the implication in its name of 10, the number of Malkuth. Malkuth is, of course, an altar. Malkuth is, of course, in itself an altar. For it is the place whereon or wherein higher forces descend, and in another sense, an altar is also a gate, particularly where the whole being is offered in dedication on the altar of sacrifice. We talked about this yesterday. This god, known as Purusha, was the god who was chosen to be sacrificed so that humanity may have a chance, so that this universe would be created, because out of Purusha came his Shakti, which is Prakriti. He split himself into many fragments, sprinkled all within the womb of Prakriti, becoming all types of life. So to say that we're all one, this is what we're talking about. Not talking about an ego level, talking about at the deepest level. We're literally the same entity, clothed in different layers of Prakriti. There's only one life. Purusha walks across this earth with a billion trillion eyes and billions of feet and hands, encompassing this whole plane. That's what Purusha is. Just like all these old legends talk about the dragon that was slain, and from its body was created man, right? We hear that in the Necronomicon. We hear it in all types of Eastern creation stories. And even with the Titans, right? The Titans being bound, and from their ashes man was created. We're talking about the same process here. Alchemy Gold asks, I wonder how old is this book? Well, I can tell you exactly. This book was written in 65. Copyright 1965. So yeah, Malkuth is an altar. And it's Purusha who has become sacrificed on this altar. So yeah, he says that particularly where the whole being is offered in dedication on the altar of sacrifice, which does not imply bloodletting, though it is equally drastic. 49. The vices of Malkuth are avarice and inertia. The avarice is obvious. One has only to look at the condition of the human race today, and the inertia will be met with by anyone who tries to change things or to do any kind of creative work. The virtue is discrimination, which is really the key and first essential to esoteric development. For it is not all who cry, Lord, Lord, who are to be listened to, and this includes aspects of oneself besides the charlatans of the outer world. You guys remember that verse in the New Testament where Christ pretty much says, on that day, right, when you find yourself needing me, on that day when you die, you're gonna call out, Lord, Lord, we was cool, we was best friends. And then Christ says, get thee away from me. I don't know who you are. Not building that relationship during life at all, and then upon death, trying to break your way into heaven, you know? The same way that if you're traveling somewhere, if you don't learn the map, then you're gonna get lost. Just like what I used to say with the Goetic spirits, you've got to build a relationship. You've got to build that relationship. Otherwise, it just doesn't exist, because it doesn't just come out of the thin air. Alchemy Gold says you can watch this live in a VR. Interesting. Oh, I've got to try that. Cool. Kite, peace. Kite says, Mages, have you gone back to Ledbetter's Etheric Double? Bunch of Vedic info in most of his publications. Yes, absolutely. So I have been looking through that one also, and you're exactly right. There's a lot of Vedic information in there. They give full credit to where they got their info from. The Theosophical team over there. It's a different team from this squad that I work with, but we're all in the same business here, so I have been studying that one as well. Yes. Stephanie Randall says, I had a dream that I was flying above people. I wonder what did it mean? That's a good question. What does flying symbolize? How do you feel about flying? Were you afraid? Did you not feel anything? Did it feel good? What was the environment like? What was the experience, basically? How did it feel? You're not really going to pull anything intellectual. What was being symbolized in that dream? That's the meaning of it. Nuru says, your meditation is a living sub-elemental, a Jed in Kemet, generating gravity, a component of fire and electricity. So never underestimate your meditation practice. It affects elementals in real time. Oh my goodness. That's deep. That is deep. Nuru says, consider the sameness of the words cheat and Jed. Just soften the ch. Jed. 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 Cheetah. Jed. Okay. A Jed. I'm gonna write that down. I know I've seen, or at least I believe I've seen what that looks like in the hieroglyphs. that's good info right there. Your meditation is a living sub-elemental, a Jed in Kemet, generating gravity, a component of fire and electricity. So never underestimate your meditation practice. It affects elementals in real time. Cool. Cool. Okay, let's continue. Society Ejects. Thank you. Society Ejects says, Matthew 23. And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. That's the verse. All right, let's keep going. So yeah, Nuru says Egypt and Hindu languages, Pali and Sanskrit, are cousin languages. I was doing some looking into the Vedic influence on Kemet and the Egyptian influence on India, and yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. Stephanie Randall says, can someone teach me one-on-one how to meditate because I don't know how? Absolutely. Maybe you can send me an email or get in contact with me on Instagram. All right, let's keep going. So we read about the circle and the triangle dealing with the evocation of entities. And let's see. We got the double cube, the altar of sacrifice. Malkuth is the altar. We talked about the virtue of discrimination, the vice of avarice and inertia. You got to do the work. The virtue is discrimination, which is really the key and first essential to esoteric development. Look, you see that? Discrimination is key. That's not one to be skipped. Discrimination is what we're learning about all up in this book right here, Gyan Yoga. He keeps referring to discrimination, viveka, discrimination, and non-attachment. Those are the two tools to begin the journey, right? Those are the two wings that he said, the two legs that you're walking with up this tree. So the virtue is discrimination, which is really the key and first essential to esoteric development. For it is not all who cry, Lord, Lord, who are to be listened to. And this includes aspects of oneself, besides the charlatans of the outer world. Of the mythological teaching, obviously all the earth gods and goddesses have great importance with regard to the Sephirah Malkuth, Demeter and Persephone perhaps most of all. For these were the deities of the Eleusinian mysteries, which was one of the greatest centers of the inner aspect of the earth cult. There is also much to be gained from investigation of the Qabiric mysteries and the gods of the underworld. 51. This concludes our analysis of the 10 holy Sephirah, and Malkuth has taken up much space and could easily take up far more. For we are beings immersed within that sphere, whether we like it or not, and it is one of the most important of the whole tree, for it is the gateway to all further spiritual development. And until the lessons of Malkuth are well and truly learnt, the paths of the higher spheres must be closed to us. Let me run that back. It is one of the most important of the whole tree, Malkuth, for it is the gateway to all further spiritual development. And until the lessons of Malkuth are well and truly learnt, the paths of the higher spheres must be closed to us. 52. It is a very human tendency to take a greater interest in what is remote, but in occultism, as in all things, it is the next step which counts. And that step for all of us is right before us in the physical world, Malkuth. Boom. It is a very human tendency to take a greater interest in what is remote, right? What's far away, what's out of our reach, what's something that we can fantasize and dream about and make a big deal in our heads, knowing damn well we're not going to do it. But in occultism, as in all things, it is the next step which counts. The next step. What's the next step? Where do we go from here? What are you doing? And that step for all of us is right before us in the physical world, Malkuth. All right. So that concludes the analysis of the 10 holy Sephiroth. I don't touch that dial. In the long run, of course, we're going to be ending now, but it's not over. We got one more aspect of this book right here, part 3. We're going to learn some more about the subtle nuances of the relationships of this tree. Peace, Louis. All right. So yeah, we've got one more part here. And in this third part, we're going to be dealing with the flexibility of the tree, the relationships of the Sephiroth, the esoteric grades, the miscellaneous attributions. Finally, we'll touch on the clip-off, and then, of course, practical applications. So give yourself a pat on the back, round of applause. You've made it this far. We have gone through 200 plus pages on this book. 200 plus pages. So we're making some great progress. If you've been with me for each book reading, you are serious. And I commend and appreciate your desire to absorb this information. I appreciate that. This is good stuff. This really is. And this can help to serve clarity into your understanding of these symbols. That's what this whole book is about. That's what this whole book is about. A practical guide to Kabbalistic symbolism. So that's what you should be learning. You should be learning about the different symbols that are used to describe this holy science. And what's going to happen is the more that you start to understand this information, you're going to go back to what you were studying previously, and you're going to find a deeper understanding of that stuff too. Because not only is it all connected, but much of the other stuff actually stems from the Vedic information or Kabbalistic information or something similar, right? Good stuff, good stuff. I love it. Okay. Good stuff. Life is perfect. Nadir says, also look at the sameness between the words Ta and Buddha. Again, just soften the P in Ta. And consider Ta Horus and Pythagoras. Whoa. Duality says, I've just started reading the other Bible teachings regarding Kabbalah, Gnostic Gospels, Dead Sea Scrolls, etc. Phenomenal book, and I can see the similarities threaded through this read. Yeah. Excellent stuff, for sure. All right, so that concludes today's book study. That concludes today's book study on Malkuth. I'm probably going to take a nap. I say that, but then I'm sure that I'm going to get wide awake as soon as I cut off this live stream. All right, well, I hope you have a great night. I really do. And I hope that this becomes more and more clear to you as the days move forward. So that by the end of this year, you're going to have such a deep understanding of this occult information that you never would have imagined, right? I hope that you get a true understanding in your own way, not only of just what the symbols represent, but a practical system of how to use these things to make change, how to become the Magus and actually create the world that you want to live in. It's possible. Some of us are doing it every single day. So I hope that for you. I hope that for you. Keep in mind, I'm going to be giving a live lecture in June the 6th in Atlanta. So if you want to go, let me know. I'll hit you up with the details on how to get a ticket. Now, apparently there's a scammer out there pretending to be me. Please use your discernment and your common sense. And, I have never inboxed anybody for a reading. I've never done that. So you're not going to get any DMs from me offering a reading. That's a scam. Just look at how the name is spelled is different. It's LVX777. All the pictures were posted in one day with like 2 likes. It's all sloppy. I'm not going to be DMing you for a reading, so don't fall for that. Don't fall for any of these scammers, because it's not just me. Plenty of other people's profiles have been imitated, and they're out here looking for people who aren't paying attention, and they try to milk them for money and talk about these readings for like $500 or whatever. I don't know. Just be smart. Ask questions. Don't assume. No. But it's all good. Have a great night. It's red because it's Mars Day. Tomorrow is Mercury Day. So have a good one. Peace, y'all. Peace. Useless Familiar. Thank you. T-Dog. Peace. Alchemy Gold. Peace. Stephanie Randall. Peace. Nuru. Peace. Society Ejects. Louis. Peace. Thank you guys for being here. Have a good night. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you guys. Peace.